spring a year later, March of 1989, almost a year. Here's my Christmas wish for joy. I wrote this in March. Here's my Christmas wish for joy and love, even though it will probably reach you so late that it will seem quite out of time. Well, hey, I'm a family man with social ties, so though tonight is a bit before December the 25th, 1988, I'll finish it when I will. Let me say that there are no strings with this letter, no reply expected. I just want to share good feelings. The best to you and yours. Now let's see what rolls out of the ballpoint. Waiting for inspiration, all that comes to mind are things not to write. For instance, my children presently watching Garfield on the TV in the next room. They are sweet and you'd probably enjoy their company, but not as a reading topic. Neither Tina, but for a different reason. Our relationship is complex and thought about and so affords lots of interesting topics for a letter. But we are in such a pleasant place in our marriage that I deliberately turned the pen from her. Suppose I were to tell some little tale for amusement and Tina didn't see the humor. Better not. Similarly, abandoned themes for various reasons for this letter: Bush's election and his stated desire to increase and expand covert activities and what that implies about us, the electorate. Fresno in autumn and how Fresno is defined by the weather for lack of any physical feature striking enough to mention. The day I gave up being American to become a bum. While noting what is not going to be noted, I recalled a balmy evening in June of 1971. My friend and I were in the tropic beach town of Santa Marta, Colombia. We had eaten a dinner of freshly caught fish in the working part of town and then walked to the end of the beach promenade furthest from the tourist lights. We seemed quite alone. There was a sliver of moon, but plenty of stars, and all the lights of the sky were reflected, dancing and flashing on the bay. We sat on a bench in the shadows against the seawall and lit a joint. The breeze smell of the sea, the town hummed pleasantly in the background. We passed the joint and chatted. We had come into town from a week camping on isolated beaches to get a hot shower and a good meal, and then resupply to return for another week of camping on a different isolated beach. We were discussing the merit of honey over sugar with our morning rum and coffee, and whether we should try and find honey in the morning market or just get on the local bus for breakfast and head to the marked Target Beach when Ralph tapped my leg. Two policemen were standing in the pool of light cast by the lamppost near the water's edge. These were Colombian police dressed in army fatigues and carrying Tommy guns, and one was pointing to us while talking to his partner. The joint was almost burnt up and we weren't carrying any, so we were not too upset to see them leave the pool of light and come towards us. And as they crossed the 20 feet or so of dark shadow to reach us, I ate the marijuana roach and lit a cigarette. The policeman who speaks is almost apologetic as he tells us that his companion thinks we've been smoking marijuana. Ralph and I are shameless in our protestations of innocence. Using our best and most fluid Spanish, we trade lines back and forth. What a scandal to harass tourists. Innocent people can't have a conversation in peace. Thieves run free while innocent people are harassed, etc. The one who had spoken to us wanted to drop the whole matter and move on, but his partner's pride had been offended, and he wanted to show that we had indeed been smoking. He grabbed my hand and held it under his partner's nose. Smell it, marijuana, I told you so. He was almost yelling. Unfortunately for him, the cigarette had been burning for a few minutes, and the first policeman couldn't get a clear smell of the sweet weed, so they walked off, and we sat back in the cool dark. But the man who had been made to look a bit foolish had the last word, and rather dramatically too. When they reached the circle of light so that he was spotlighted as if on a stage, he turned, put one hand on the barrel of his automatic weapon while pointing to us with the other and said, "I'll be looking for you." Then he stepped from the circle of light and disappeared. In the next few weeks, the incident faded from our thoughts as we went about living on one tropical beach and then another, camping in the ruins of an ancient civilization, diving to coral reefs, climbing by midnight moon to sit on a headland, hoping to see turtles lumber up from the sea to nest with high tide, and many other wonderful things. We'd forgotten it completely by the time we were leaving the coast to return to Bogota, the capital city in the high Andes to the south. We were sitting on a little bar, killing time, waiting to hop a freight train being shunted together in the yard across the street. Because we would not be coming back, all our gear was in the bags at our feet, including Ralph's pound of the golden-colored marijuana, pride of the tropical coast, that he would use to warm the colder climate of the mountains. drinking beer, discussing how best to hop a freight, which boxcar and where and when. We were not paying much attention to people moving in and out of the swinging saloon doors when the cop from the beach walk incident pushed through. He saw us immediately and stopped in the doorway and stared. I recognized him and his Tommy gun right away. As he made his way across the room to us, provocative images filled my mind. He stopped at our table, put his hand on my shoulder. After a brief pause, he said with no smile, "Tell me the truth. You were smoking, weren't you?" I could feel his hand on my shoulder and the weed at my feet and the heart in my chest. There were lots of ways to answer. I looked in his face and said, "Yes." I knew it. The first smile he'd ever showed us lit his face. He turned and walked out the swinging doors. Sometimes life is like that. It's now a few months later, well into 1989. I'm sitting at night in a motel in Sacramento where I'm giving a week-long training in the work that I do, and I've got leisure to write. Driving here from Fresno, my thoughts turned to anthropology, my major area of study at Cal State Long Beach. I was thinking that most people I know would find it laughable that after 100 years or so as a defined field of scientific study, anthropology has yet to define people, the object of the study. Were the band who sat around a campfire in a cave near present-day Beijing 200,000 years ago using stones to crack bones to get at tomorrow people? Does walking upright, as no other animal does, do it? There is direct evidence of creatures or people striding across an African plain much as you or I stride and leaving foot tracks a couple of million years ago. Were they people? Myself, I say it takes speech and time to be people, not grunting for food and shouting warnings, but rather saying, "I'll meet you for dinner after the danger is past." To quote the Bible, "In the beginning was the Word," which, if you think about it, is speech about time. Returning to the topic of funny anthropology, as if the inability to define what it claims to study were not ludicrous enough, anthropology cannot define race either. Many serious students have applied the scientific method rigorously to the study of race for years, and the conclusion is that there is no race to be studied. People are people, some more closely related than others, but none so unique as to be a race apart. Science can't study race because race is imaginary. Funny, or it would be funny if it were noted, to me the news should be heralded in the mass media, taught from elementary school, in the education system, and espoused by everyone. Race is something the Aryan Brotherhood and Louis Farrakhan can natter on about as if it meant something. But to speak of blacks and whites and browns in any such category of people as if something was really meant is willfully ignorant. The training ended more than a month ago. It's now in March and time to wrap this letter up. I've reread what I've written so far and laugh to see that I claim as a topic risible anthropology, but then trumpet the findings of anthropology like a preacher doing some serious sermonizing. Well, you know what my opinion is worth and why I give it so freely. I don't think it matters. That thought leads to poetry, or at least verse. There is a beautifully illustrated children's book, The Butterfly Ball and the Grasshopper's Feast by William Plomer, in which all sorts of the small animals are invited to and attend a party. And I want to quote the verse from one invitee. This is Old Blind Mole. Old Blind Mole, among his homemade tunnels is the deep, dark hole, the secret home and hideout of Old Blind Mole. It's not a tidy hidey hole. He's not a tidy hidey mole. It's dusty, musty, dingy, and on the floor he scatters half-chewed scraps of worms and things. He doesn't think it matters. Since the first time I read Old Blind Mole's hidey hole, I have associated it with my mind, also filled with half-chewed scraps of worms and things, and I don't think it matters. Go Mole! There is another poem that I want to copy for your pleasure that I came to mind as I reread the story of the cop in Santa Marta. This is by Emily Dickinson, and like all of her work, untitled. A narrow fellow in the grass occasionally rides. You may have met him, have you not? His note is sudden is. The grass defines us with a comb, a spotted shaft is seen, and then it closes at your feet and moves further on. He likes a boggy acre, a floor too cool for corn, and yet when a child and barefoot, I more than once at morn have passed, I thought, a whiplash of braiding in the sun. When stooping to secure it, it wrinkled and was gone. Several of nature's people I know, and they know me. I feel for them a transport of cordiality, but never met this fellow, attended or alone, without a tighter breathing and zero at the bone. Zero at the bone, I love that. Try to figure out what she means word for word, and it makes no sense. But if you ever put your foot down all unawares next to a snake that snapped away, well, then you know the feeling. Emily's encounter with the snake feeling is like my sense with the cop in Santa Marta, almost. Except it wasn't quite zero at the bone, maybe like 1 or 2 at the bone, but it was pretty freaky anyway. Well, that's it from Liberty Street, and I want to get this over and in the mail before yet another month slips by, so I close with peace and love. Eric.